Rain fell in uneven sheets across the narrow country lane, turning the mud slick and treacherous beneath the tires of Eli's old road bike. He had never liked riding alone this late, but the stubborn pull of the forest at the edge of town was too strong to ignore. Then he saw it, a German shepherd, sleek and black, moving with purpose between the shadows of the trees. Its eyes caught as for a heartbeat, sharp and intelligent, before it disappeared down a hidden path. Something about its urgency pricked at Eli's gut, a mix of dread and curiosity that made him follow, unaware that what awaited by the old well would unravel everything he thought he knew about his quiet town. Eli tightened the straps of his worn cycling gloves as he pedaled to the last streaks of asphalt, the rhythmic splash of water against his tires echoing in the empty countryside. The wind carried the scent of wet pine and earth, heavy and pungent, and he felt an uneasy thrill as he approached the darkened tree line that marked the forest's edge. Most locals avoided this place after dusk. Stories lingered of strange sounds, of people who went in and never came back, or returned, changed, hollow-eyed, and mute. Eli had heard the whispers, but told himself they were just old fears clinging stubbornly to superstition. The German shepherd appeared again before him, a dark silhouette moving with uncanny precision between the trunks. It paused, ears pricked, head tilted slightly, as if inviting him to follow. Eli's chest tightened, but curiosity outweighed caution. He adjusted his bike, gripping the handlebars tightly, and followed the dog onto the narrow, root-choked trail that led into the forest. Rainwater ran in rivulets down his neck as he pedaled, the mud clinging to his tires, sucking at each push. The forest swallowed sound here. Even the wind seemed afraid to speak. The dog's paws barely made a noise against the sodden earth, and Eli realized he had to pedal faster just to keep up. Each tree passed like a dark sentinel, their gnarled roots twisting like veins across the path. Wait up," Eli called. But the forest only replied with a distant hiss of rain and the occasional rustle of unseen animals. He finally came to a clearing. Moonlight, fractured through dense clouds, touched the grass in patches that shone like silver. The dog sat at the far end, facing a structure Eli recognized instantly from local tales. The old well. Its stones were cracked, warm with moss, and a wooden cover lay askew, revealing darkness that seemed to swallow the air itself. Eli's breath caught in his throat. His mind screamed to turn back, but some part of him, the same part that had made him follow the dog, refused. He dismounted, leaving the bike leaning against a tree, and took cautious steps toward the well. The dog remained seated, its dark eyes fixed on him, unblinking. A sudden gust of wind carried a metallic scent, iron, blood, and something else he couldn't identify. Eli stopped. The forest held its breath. From inside the well came a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a whimper. Eli's heart stuttered. He squatted, peering into shadows, trying to make sense of what he heard. The whimper turned into a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against stone. His mind spun with possibilities, most of them terrifying. He felt the weight of the empty forest pressing down on him, a tangible presence. "Hello?" His voice trembled despite his effort to stay calm. "Is someone there?" Silence, then a wet, guttural growl echoed from the shadows. The dog barked once, short and sharp, as if warning him off. Eli's hands shook, his pulse thrumming painfully in his ears. He could see nothing but blackness. The forest had a strange way of twisting distance. The edges of the clearing seemed to stretch, pulling him in, leaving him isolated and exposed. He should have left then. He should have pedaled back through the mud-soaked path and never looked over his shoulder. But curiosity and something darker, an odd sense of responsibility, kept him rooted. Eli stepped closer to the well, feeling the cold, slick stones under his fingertips. The whimper came again, sharper this time, unmistakably human. Panic clawed at him, but he swallowed it down, forcing himself to think. The dog barked again, louder, more insistent. Then, almost without thinking, Eli pulled his phone from his pocket. No signal. Of course. The forest didn't just swallow sound. It swallowed communication, too. He was completely alone, except for the dog, and whatever was in the well. He crouched at the edge, peering into the darkness, straining to make out shapes. A A faint glimmer reflected off something deep inside, a wet, dirty patch that didn't belong. He swallowed against the lump forming in his throat. "I'm coming," he whispered, voice barely audible over the rain. Then movement. A hand, small, pale, trembling, emerged from the shadows, dragging itself along the stone rim. Eli's stomach dropped. The child was soaked, covered in mud, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with terror. "Hey! Hey, it's okay," he said, kneeling, reaching out. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog circled the well, hackles raised, growling low. The child flinched at its sound, wrapping her arms around herself. Eli realized then that the dog wasn't a threat. It was guarding her. Somehow, instinctively, he grabbed a sturdy branch from the nearby undergrowth, wedging it under her arms, and began to pull. She was heavier than she looked, limp from fear and exhaustion. His muscles screamed with the effort, but adrenaline carried him through. Finally, with final heave, she toppled on the grass beside him, coughing, shivering, but alive. Eli pulled his jacket over her, wrapping her as best he could against the chill. He glanced at the dog, whose ears remained alert, body tense. It didn't move closer, just watched, waiting. Who are you?" Eli asked the girl softly. She didn't answer at first, only stared at him, wide-eyed and pale. Then she whispered, They're coming." Eli's pulse spiked. "Who's coming?" Her lips trembled. "The men, the ones who took me." The sound of footsteps in the mud behind them made Eli spin. The forest had ears, he realized, and whoever was coming had been tracking them all along. Shadows shifted between the trees. Eli's mind raced, calculating escape routes. The bike was useless now, the clearing too exposed. "Run," he hissed at the girl. "We can make it." But the dog stepped forward, baring its teeth, letting out a low growl that reverberated through the clearing. It was a warning and a challenge. The figures emerging from the trees froze, then hesitated. Eli realized something chilling. This dog wasn't just a guide. It was their protector, the only barrier between the girl and the danger lurking beyond. The rain continued to fall, steady and cold, drenching them all, washing the mud from the trail, but not from their minds. Eli's chest ached with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He didn't know who these men were, why the girl had been there, or how much time they had. One thing was clear. The forest had secrets, and tonight he had stumbled into one that could destroy lives. The girl shivered, pressing closer to him. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks, streaked with tears. Eli looked into her eyes and saw something he didn't expect. Not just terror, but trust. Fragile, trembling trust. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing. He couldn't let them down. Not now. The dog barked again, sharp and urgent, and turned toward the deeper shadows of the forest, almost beckoning Eli to follow. He hesitated, but the girl's hand found his, small and cold, gripping tight. And he knew there was no turning back. The forest swallowed them, the old well standing silent behind them, holding its secrets for another stormy night. Eli moved cautiously, dragging the girl behind him along the narrow, root-choked path. Every step sank slightly into mud, the cold seeping through his soaked shoes and pants. Her small hand clutched his tightly, her trembling fingers finding his with instinctive trust. The German shepherd led the way, silent and precise, ears twitching at every forest whisper. "Do you remember your name?" Eli asked quietly, trying to keep his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "Lila," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Her teeth chattered, but there was a strange steadiness in the way she said it, a quiet resilience that surprised him. Eli swallowed, keeping his gaze on the path ahead. Lila's voice had broken the tension, but it also reminded him how small she was, how vulnerable. He wished he had brought more than a jacket to shield her. A twig snapped behind them. Eli froze, the sound sharp and echoing unnaturally in the wet, dense forest. The dog growled low in its throat, hackles raised. Shadows shifted, quick and deliberate, weaving between the trees. "Stay behind me," Eli murmured, gripping the branch he had taken earlier like a spear. The forest seemed to hold its breath again, the rain falling harder, masking some sounds and amplifying others. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the snap of twigs, the wet slap of mud against boots. Out of the shadows emerged a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a soaked leather jacket and a baseball cap that masked his face. His eyes, dark and calculating, swept over them. He stopped a few feet away, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Who are you?" Eli demanded. His voice wavered despite the effort to appear calm. The man tilted his head slightly, a sardonic smile tugging at his lips. "Just someone looking for what belongs to me," he said. His tone was casual, almost conversational, but it carried a sharp edge that made Eli's stomach tighten. The dog barked, charging forward slightly, teeth bare but didn't lunge. Its presence alone seemed enough to make the man pause. "Easy, boy," the man said, holding up his hands again. "I don't want to hurt the dog or the girl." His eyes flicked toward Lila, and she shrank instinctively but didn't cry. Eli tightened his grip on the branch. "She's coming with me. Whoever you are, you're not taking her back." The man laughed softly, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. "You think you can just wander into my territory and take her? This forest isn't kind to outsiders, Cyclist." Eli felt anger flare, but beneath it, fear. This man had an air of power, of someone used to being obeyed. His instincts screamed that he was dangerous. The man's gaze shifted, noticing the dog. He frowned, like he hadn't expected its presence. "Ah, the guardian. Clever girl, isn't it?" He gestured vaguely at Lila. "She's lucky, but luck only lasts so long." Eli's throat tightened. "We don't have time for games. Back off, or I swear." "Or you swear what?" The man interrupted, stepping closer, mud squelching under his boots. "You're alone, scared and wet. That branch isn't going to save you if my friends decide to join in." The hairs on Eli's neck prickled. Friends? How many were there? He glanced at the trees, noticing the shadows flickering, as if more figures were watching from the undergrowth. His heart began to race, panic clawing at the edges of his mind. Before he could react, Lila tugged on his sleeve. "He's lying," she whispered, eyes wide. "He's not alone. He can't be alone." Eli nodded grimly. "I know." He shifted the branch slightly, ready, his eyes darting between the man and the darkened forest around them. The man's smile grew, faint but dangerous. "You're brave, foolishly brave. But bravery doesn't always win." He took a slow step forward, then another. "You've already made mistakes by coming here. And mistakes can be costly." The dog growled again, low and threatening. It took a stance directly between Eli and the man, chest lowered, tail stiff. Its eyes burned with intelligence and intent. And for the first time, Eli felt a flicker of hope. The dog wasn't just a guide. It was a fighter, and it understood the stakes better than he did. The man froze, glanced at the dog, then back at Eli. "I see you understand it too," he said, voice quieter now, almost begrudging. "Smart boy." He turned sharply and disappeared into the trees, his departure silent except for the soft rustle of branches. Eli exhaled slowly, lowering the branch. Is he gone?" Lila whispered, voice trembling. "I think so," Eli said cautiously, scanning the forest for movement. "But we need to keep moving." The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but the forest remained oppressive, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and pine. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. Eli's muscles ached, his fingers cramped from holding the branch too tightly. But he pushed on, guided by the dog, whose sense of direction seemed instinctual, unerring. They came to a small clearing where the remnants of an abandoned cabin leaned against the forest's edge. The wood was rotted, paint peeling, windows shattered. Inside, Eli spotted dry patches and sheltered corners that might serve as temporary refuge. "Stay close," he instructed, helping Lila through the doorway. The air inside was stale and musty, but at least it was dry. He let her sit on a broken chair, wrapping her in his jacket as best he could. Eli paced the small cabin, listening. The forest outside was alive with sound, the drip of water from leaves, the distant call of an owl, the faint rustle of movement. He realized that the man he had encountered wasn't working alone, and that knowledge made the pit in his stomach deepen. Whoever these people were, they had been hunting Lila for a reason, and he had no idea what that reason was. Why me? Lila asked suddenly, her voice breaking the tense silence. Why did they why me? Eli crouched to meet her gaze. I don't know, he admitted honestly. But I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together. Her small hands gripped his, and for a moment, Eli felt a strange warmth, a fragile connection that anchored him amid the chaos. The forest outside might be full of danger, but here, in this tiny cabin, he felt a glimmer of purpose. Hours passed as they rested, but the tension never left Eli. Every shadow beyond the window felt like it could contain a threat. Every gust of wind through the broken walls set his nerves on edge. The dog remained alert, occasionally lifting its head to growl softly, ears twitching. By midnight, Eli knew they couldn't stay. They needed a plan, an escape route, something that would put distance between them and the hunters. But as he prepared to leave, he realized the forest had more secrets than he could have imagined. The trail they had followed wasn't just a path. It was a trap, carefully laid to funnel anyone who entered toward the well, toward danger. And now that trap had been sprung. Eli glanced at Lila, sleeping fitfully under his jacket, and the dog, ever watchful, and felt a surge of determination. He didn't know what awaited deeper in the forest, but he understood one thing. The old well was only the beginning. Whatever had taken Lila was tied to the forest, and the forest wasn't finished with them yet. A distant howl pierced the night, and Eli stiffened. Not the dogs. Something else, larger, more menacing. His pulse quickened. The forest was alive, and it knew they were there. He swallowed, steeling himself. They couldn't turn back. The path ahead was dark, treacherous, and filled with unknown dangers. But Eli knew one thing with absolute clarity. He would protect Lila, no matter the cost. The forest seemed to close in around them as they stepped into night, the old well's shadow lingering behind, like a silent reminder of the horrors they had narrowly escaped. And somewhere in the darkness, eyes watched, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Eli tightened his grip on the girl's hand and glanced at the dog, whose eyes gleamed with unwavering focus. Whatever lay ahead, they were in it together, and that bond, fragile, tense, yet unbreakable, was the only thing that might save them from the shadows and the trees. The forest had grown darker, the canopy thickening until the moonlight barely filtered through. Every step Eli took felt heavier, laden with the knowledge that the shadows weren't empty. Somewhere out there, the men from earlier or others were watching, waiting, calculating. The dog led the way, moving silently, instinctively, while Lila clung to Eli's side, shivering, half awake from exhaustion. Eli, where are we going? She whispered, her voice trembling. Somewhere safe, he replied, though he wasn't certain of that himself. Every instinct in his body screamed that nothing in this forest could be considered safe, yet the dog moved with certainty, as if it knew the destination. Hours seemed to pass, the rain having stopped, but the air still heavy and wet. The forest floor was slick with mud, roots, and decaying leaves. Eli's arms ached from carrying Lila when necessary, and each snapped twig or rustling bush made him flinch. He knew they were being hunted. He just didn't know how many or how close. Finally, the path opened into a wide clearing. In its center stood another well, not as old, but clearly abandoned, with rotting stones and a rusted pulley system. The dog stopped abruptly, its tail stiff, ears pricked. Lila hid behind Eli, her small body trembling. This one, Eli muttered. The old well from earlier came to mind, and a shiver ran down his spine. Why here? The dog barked once sharply, and then padded to the edge, sniffing the ground. It was as though it were confirming something, a silent ritual of recognition. Eli stepped closer, peering into the darkness below. At first he saw nothing, just blackness that seemed to stretch down infinitely. Then, faintly, a light flickered, a weak, bluish glow, as if emanating from deep within. Eli's stomach twisted with fear and anticipation. Lila, stay back, he whispered. I'll check it. She didn't resist, clinging to his jacket as he leaned over the rim. The glow was faint, intermittent, pulsing almost like a heartbeat. He couldn't see what it was, but he felt its pull, a mixture of dread and curiosity that made him swallow hard. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him, a voice he hadn't expected. You shouldn't have come back. Eli spun around. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man, the same one from before, but now he wasn't alone. Two others emerged from the trees, faces obscured by shadows. Their eyes glinted with cold intent. Eli's heart pounded, adrenaline surging, and he realized this time there might be no way out. "Who are you?" Eli demanded, raising the branch defensively. "What do you want with her?" The first man's smile was thin, humorless. "She's special. You don't understand, but you'll see soon enough." He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. "And you, Cyclist, have been meddling where you don't belong." Eli's pulse raced. The dog growled, a low, resonant sound that made the men hesitate. But the pause was brief. One of the other men produced a knife, its blade reflecting the pale light. The forest seemed to grow still, anticipating violence. "You won't hurt her," Eli said, stepping in front of Lila, chest heaving. "I don't care what you think. She's coming with me." The man with the knife laughed softly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, and neither does she." Lila's hand found Eli's, gripping it tightly. "Eli, please," she whispered, fear and urgency mingling in her tone. Don't let them. She didn't finish, but Eli understood. Her trust in him was absolute, fragile, and he refused to betray it. The tension snapped when the dog lunged, teeth bared, striking one of the men in the arm. He screamed, stumbling backward, and the other two men advanced, cautious now. Eli seized the moment, grabbing Lila and bolting toward the edge of the clearing. Mud splashed, roots caught at their feet, and the forest swallowed them in darkness. Branches tore at their jackets. The undergrowth snagged their shoes, but they ran. The dog stayed close, moving like a shadow, fiercely protective. Behind them, shouts and curses echoed, mingling with the sounds of pursuit. Eli knew they couldn't outrun them forever. They needed a plan. Finally, they reached the edge of the original clearing, the one with the old well. Eli paused, heart racing, and looked down into the darkness. Something had changed. The faint whimpering he had heard earlier was gone. In its place was silence, oppressive and complete. I think we have to go down," he muttered, glancing at Lila. "I think that's where the answers are." She stared at him, fear mingling with trust. "You'll stay with me?" "Always," he said, swallowing hard. They descended cautiously, using the old stones as footholds. The dog went first, sniffing, alert, guiding them with an instinct Eli could only marvel at. Deeper and deeper they went, until the faint glow from earlier became stronger, revealing the shocking truth. The bottom of the well wasn't just a pit of darkness. It was a hidden chamber, walls slick with moisture, lined with ancient stones. And in the center, bound by ropes but unharmed, sat a group of children, dozens of them pale, frightened but alive. Their eyes widened at the sight of Eli and Lila, and hope flickered in the darkness. Eli's stomach twisted. This was bigger than he imagined. The men weren't just hunting Lila. They were part of a network, using the forest and these hidden wells as prisons. The forest itself had been a cage, the old well a secret no one dared speak of. The dog barked once, alerting him to movement above. The three men had followed them down, emerging from a hidden ladder. Eli felt a surge of fear, but refused to panic. The children's trust depended on him. "You can't take them," the man said, voice cold, eyes glinting. "They're ours. They've always been ours. You don't get to decide that." Eli shot back, heart racing. "Not anymore." The fight that followed was brutal but precise. The dog leapt at one man, teeth sinking into his arm, while Eli used a branch to fend off the others. The children scattered, crying out but moving towards safer corners of the chamber. The air was thick with panic, the scent of wet stone and sweat. Then came the twist Eli hadn't expected. One of the men, bleeding, grinned with a horrifying calm. "You really think you can save them?" he said. "You don't understand, Cyclist. One of these children, your little friend here, is the key. That's why she's special." Eli froze. Lila's eyes widened. Fear and confusion mirrored in her gaze. "What do you mean?" he demanded. The man laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. She remembers things, things only she can remember. That knowledge makes her valuable. And now, you've interfered with forces you cannot comprehend. Eli's heart pounded, dread mixing with rage. But the dog's growl reminded him of what mattered. Lila wasn't a key, a prize, or a secret weapon. She was a child, and he would protect her at all costs. The final struggle was violent, chaotic. Eli managed to disarm the remaining men, aided by the dog's fierce precision. Bruised, bleeding, and exhausted, he stood over the defeated men, panting, watching the forest beyond the well, as if the trees themselves had been complicit in the ordeal. He turned to the children, helping them untangle ropes, checking for injuries. Lila stood close, small hand in his, eyes wide but trusting. "You're safe now," he whispered, voice raw. "I promise." The glow in the chamber dimmed as dawn broke outside. Rain clouds parted, and a pale light filtered through cracks in the well stones. Eli felt a strange calm settle over him. The forest silent for the first time in hours. The horrors of the night were behind them, but the memory, the fear, the betrayal, the moral grayness of those who had enslaved children would linger. The dog lay at his feet, alert but at peace, having fulfilled its role. Eli understood then that the forest hadn't just tested him, it had chosen him, in its own cryptic way, to protect what was precious and innocent. Lila looked up at him, her small face streaked with tears and dirt. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli knelt, brushing mud from her hair. "No, thank you," he said softly, "for trusting me." The forest seemed to exhale, releasing its tension, but Eli knew the memory of the well, the shadows, the men, and the dog's fierce loyalty would haunt him forever. He had survived. Lila had survived. And in a quiet, deeply human resolution, he realized that some battles, against fear, against darkness, against betrayal, were never truly over. But courage, empathy, and trust, fragile though they were, could illuminate even the deepest shadows. Eli led the children out of the forest, the sun rising behind them, the dog faithfully by his side. The old well stood silent, holding its secrets, a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the light they had carried out of it.